Welcome to Ei Café with Azeem, in which he reflects on key aspects of life and business through the lens of emotional intelligence. You will learn how emotional intelligence can be used for your success in both personal and professional lives. The podcasts cover topics on leadership, collaboration, culture, building a positive mindset, and even raising kids. You will hear key life lessons and tips from the most prominent personalities, business leaders, entrepreneurs, AI practitioners, and executive coaches from around the world. So sit back, relax with a cup of coffee as we get into today's show, Ei Café with Azeem.
I am a musician and I played the flute and the piccolo when I was studying in university. The concert band director was this person who was really well liked until he got to the podium. He would get up and he would raise his arms, getting ready to conduct us, but there was no downbeat. It was really hard to follow his tempo, to see what he was doing. As a musician, you were stressed thinking you weren't going to come in at the right time or that you missed a cue, but there was no cue. Playing under him was such a stressful experience because we never knew if we were in the right spot or if we were even going to finish together. The funny thing is, he thought he was a great conductor. He thought that he was well liked and he was doing everything that people liked, and somehow missed the fact that we were all in our seats sweating and dreading the moment he took the podium. And the thing that he missed was this idea of understanding how he landed on us, understanding how we experience him, which is part of what great leaders do. They don't just make assumptions. They take a moment to check in and understand that the experience that people have of them is exactly what they intend.
Storytelling plays a pivotal role in a crafting organization culture by conveying core values, history, and vision in a relatable and engaging way. It helps employees connect emotionally with organization's mission and fostering sense of belonging. Ladies and gentlemen, greetings to you from Colombo, Sri Lanka. This is Ei Café with Azeem, and I'm your host, Azeem Saheer, a human capital specialist, a Lego series play facilitator, an emotional intelligence and emotional culture tech practitioner. Of course, I'm one of the lead facilitators at Luminary Learning Solutions. Of course, this week's show helps you to explore the impact of emotional intelligence on our life through engaging conversation with industry leaders, innovators, executive coaches, and thought leaders. We aim to inspire and empower you. Now, little bit of surprise, little bit of a change. What did you just hear? What did you just heard about it? Is a story. So today's topic is about crafting culture through the power of storytelling, shaping the organizational identity. To have this conversation, of course, you heard my guest and you saw my guest. Let me officially introduce her. Karen Eber is author and leadership consultant and a keynote speaker. Her TED Talk show on how your brain responds to stories continues to inspire millions. Her book, The Perfect Story, How to Tell Stories That Inform, Influence, and Inspire, was selected as a Next Big Idea Club must-read. As the CEO and the chief storyteller of Eber Leadership Group, Karen helps Fortune 500 companies like GE, Microsoft build leaders, teams, and culture, one story at a time. She frequently contributes to and is featured in Fast Company, Quads, Entrepreneur, MSN, Forbes, INC, and Business Insider. Karen guest lecturer at university including MIT, Stanford, and is a former head of culture and learning and leadership development at GE and Deloitte. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Karen Eber, CEO and Chief Storyteller of Eber Leadership Group. Karen, welcome to the cafe.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
All right, brilliant. It was something new. I wanted to try it out. I think thank you for really helping me, because the reason I want to start with the stories, I want to just get the touch and feel what our listeners, what our viewers think about. Okay, what's happening here now? What is Azeem? Where's Azeem? We see someone, a lady over here, and she's telling something really unrelated story. Now, Karen, I'm just curious to know, when you share this story, what would you think my listeners or viewers would think about, or what would be the thought process going, or what would be their brain might be doing at that moment? Let's start with that question.
Probably two things. One, just like you said, who is this person and why is she talking and what is she talking about? Because that is not how I expected this to start, which kicks their brain out of lazy mode and makes it spend some calories and pay attention, which is something that we want. The second thing is probably thinking of a leader that they have experienced that maybe didn't land on them the way that that leader would hope, or maybe even thinking about their own leadership and how others might experience them. And that's what we want stories to do, right? They're not just here to entertain us, they're here to get our brains thinking and making assumptions and predictions and using that to inform how we decide going forward.
Brilliant. What a perfect start. So I'm really curious. I was even listening to your presentation at thecoaching.com. You touched key element in terms of brain function and the story. I'm curious to bring that up for my learning and my viewers and audience learning purpose. How does this whole piece of emotion and the stories connect? Every story doesn't need to connect to an emotion, or just data. What do you think?
Well, I think every story should experience or connect to emotion, but emotion isn't I'm excited or I'm overjoyed or I'm fearful. It can be really subtle things that we're feeling. What happens when we are listening to stories is really three things are taking place in our brain. The first is that stories create this artificial reality of experiences. And so your brain lets you feel like you are alongside those main characters, and it lights up in the same patterns as the storytellers when a story is told well. And that's why you're watching a movie and your heart is racing as though you are the character on screen, even though you're not moving. So this artificial reality lets us think about, what would I do in this situation? What would I want to do going forward? And even though we don't necessarily have those experiences, that impacts the decisions we make going forward. The second thing is that stories do lead to this neurochemical shift of trust. So when a leader, when a person is telling a story, we naturally feel a sense of empathy towards them. It's almost like we are responding to them communicating in a different way, even if it's not a story about themselves. That empathy creates a release of oxytocin, and oxytocin is the bonding chemical that you cannot fake, you cannot manipulate, you can't even command it. It's a genuine response. And it sends the signal to the brain that is almost like this person feels safe to be around. So this is why you maybe have been to an offsite retreat, or you get the chance to spend time with someone learning more about them and you come away feeling a bond. It's because you experience this oxytocin shift. And what numerous studies have found is that the more oxytocin that's released, the more you end up trusting that person. So a good story can strengthen someone's trust in the person telling it. And the third thing is that we decide through emotions, not through data. And there's a neuroscientist, Antonio Damasio, who has studied this, of how are we making decisions. And he looked at patients that had damage to the frontal lobe of their brain. So these people had jobs and relationships, they were functioning. You would not have known that they had brain damage. But the one thing they couldn't do was experience emotions. They had an
Mm,
emotionally flat affect. If you
mm,
showed them a
mm,
gory
mm,
photo, they had
mm,
no response.
mm,
And
mm,
because they couldn't experience emotions, they could
mm,
not make decisions.
mhm.
What the neuroscientists have found is that as we take in information through our senses, it gets stored in our long-term memory as these
Right,
experiences.
right.
But intertwined in that are the
Mm,
emotions around it.
mm,
And when it's time to make a decision, our brains start scanning our long-term memory of experiences, of understanding, and
mm,
all
mm.
of these emotions, and uses that to inform decision making,
Yeah.
all at a subconscious level before we're aware. The moment we become aware is when we start to apply rationalization, which is why
Mm,
we think we're making these logic-based decisions. So by telling a story, you can connect people to these emotions. You can help them think about what they would do in situations
mm,
they may have never
mm,
experienced
mm,
before,
mm.
all of which are so critical when you are trying to build leaders and shape culture.
Absolutely. I think you're truly spot on. I love the whole three aspect to it. I'm curious, and I have listened to your TikTok. It's amazing. And you bring a term called neurocoupling. Now, where does this neurocoupling come in terms of, is it empathy? Is it the point two or three? Which one do you think neurocoupling works around?
Yeah, neurocoupling is actually the first one. It's the scientific definition translated is that your brain is going to light up in the
Mm,
same pattern as the
mm,
storyteller. So you think about if you've watched a movie like Jaws with the shark, which so many people are familiar with, and you watch the movie and you feel like your heart rate is picking up. Some of that
yeah.
is neural coupling. Your brain
Oh,
is there saying you are in the water, you better swim, even though you're sitting calmly watching it on a screen. Um, Neural coupling only applies when a story is told really well. So the important
mm,
takeaway is that it's not enough to tell a story. The way you tell one makes a difference in the experience. We have all sat through enough boring meetings and dinners with the relatives where there are boring stories told and our minds wander and we think about
yeah,
something else and we are not touched by the story. So I
yeah.
hate the advice when people say, tell a story, because it's not enough to tell one. The way you tell one, the way you are
Mm,
going to put things
mm,
in
mm.
that make the brain spend calories and build tension are going to make a difference in that experience and how much brain activity you have.
Fantastic. I think you're leading me to the next segment of the question is like, now, yes, it's important that other feels about the story. So when taken organized in the context, it's about cultures. Now, how stories can help to craft cultures, especially in any set of organization, small,
Sure.
medium, large, anything. And how to ensure, so the first part is that, and how to ensure these stories doesn't manipulate. Now this is so vital in terms of a culture, because many people, employees, they say when leader comes and tell a story, this my guy is making it up just to get our work done, that that feeling might appear. So when we tell stories to build craft cultures, and at the same time, how we ensure that it doesn't manipulate the core values. What's your thought?
Yeah, let's start with the first part of how are you telling stories to shape culture. The first thing is to recognize that it's already happening today. When two people get on IM and they talk about a meeting or they talk about what they're thinking about, that is shaping culture. If you're in a meeting and someone interrupts the speaker and nobody stops it, you're now reinforcing the
Mm,
culture that happened. So, like every day, conversations are happening in meetings and outside of meetings that shape your culture. And these are demonstrating what you value and reinforce in the organization or what a leader values and reinforces. So the best thing is to be intentional about what do we value? What do we want more of? And I
mm,
don't mean your value statements. As lovely as they are not specific enough. The reason why a story works more powerful than a value statement of trust or integrity is it gives a specific example of what that looks like in a day-to-day basis. And that's what you want to do. If I'm a leader of a team, I want to tell the stories of the unsung heroes on the team and the things that maybe other people don't know that I want to celebrate and give recognition to. I want to tell stories of different accomplishments. I want to make sure we are all talking about mistakes that we've made and failures that we've had so that we're creating a place where it's okay to not only share those things, but discuss and learn from them. I want to talk about my development so my team knows how important that is for me. I want to have us tell stories about the conflict that we faced and how we've overcome them. I want us to tell stories about what would it look like if we failed on this project? What would it look like if we succeeded? Each of these things start to demonstrate this is what we want more of. I've headed up culture in companies and headed up leadership development, and I spent a lot of time telling stories about what do our great leaders do? What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? What are the teams that we want more of? What are they doing? And these aren't just these wonderful successes. These are mistakes and missteps, because it's important to paint a realistic image, to not feel like we are just coming in and manipulating. So the best thing to do is to really sit down, even at a team level, and think about what is important to us. How do we tell the stories of people that have taken all of their vacation and completely disconnected during that? How do we tell the stories of resilience? Because these are now the things that we are saying, this is what we value, this is important to us. And so that's an important place to start. For manipulation sets in when someone feels like something is made up or information is intentionally being withheld. So we have all probably experienced something in the media that felt like it was manipulated, whether that's an image on Instagram that isn't true, or whether it's maybe an article by a journalist that we now view questionably. The way you avoid manipulation is, one, don't make up stories. The moment that you do, people are really good at detecting it. And as soon as someone thinks that you are manipulating or making up a story, they lose trust in you. The second thing is, be transparent about what you can share, why you're sharing it. So particularly with data, when you are sharing data, sharing the story of what you set out to understand with the data and what you see today and what is still not understood, or what questions you have, is much better than crafting a message that feels like it's being manipulated. And so I encourage you to not tell stories for policies and mandates. Like if there's a return to office decision or there's a merger, don't wrap that in a story. People will feel like it's very disingenuous. Treat people like adults and communicate when there are policies and decisions. But for the other things, it is sharing what you can, being transparent about what you can, and not making things up.
So what I'm hearing is create that story more authentic, to build connection. And I'm just going back to the first response you gave me. I'm just curious to know, have you ever experienced, now there's a talk going, right? There's a label going on in terms of generations, right? Boomers, YZ, millennial, now Gen Zs and alphas and etc. Now, we used to listen to those stories and sit and listen, but have you ever experienced the very lately or recently that people come and say, okay, we don't want to listen to your stories anymore. No, it's so boring and we know what to do. You don't need to tell stories. Have you come across something like that?
No, if that happens, it is because you need to do more work on your story. Your story may be falling flat. It might not be meaningful for that audience. You may be just listing events and not really engaging the brain. What I find is many people in a business setting will sit in so many meetings. And in those meetings, someone has spent 2 hours putting together the perfect PowerPoint deck and picking the slides that they think are beautiful and creating wonderful images. And they spend maybe 5 minutes thinking about what they're actually going to say. So the experience the employee has is boredom and not having clarity on what to do with it and how to move forward. And so when you start to communicate with a story, there is more interest, but it is important to make it meaningful for your audience and to put in enough details that really engage the brain.
So on that line, can I ask you to share, like, what are some, simple techniques we can follow to develop a perfect story, especially on a culture, organizers in a context? What sort of a story, technique we can use? A simple one or two tips you can share with us?
Yeah, the first is that your story is always going to start with your audience. When a story doesn't land, it's often because it's not meaningful to you. It doesn't feel like you can relate to it or that there's something that you are supposed to do with it. And so you always want to start with your audience and getting clear on what outcome you want them to experience, even if you know the story you're going to tell. So you're going to ask yourself 4 questions, which is first one is, what do I want them to feel and think? What's that internal experience that I want them to have? The second is, what do I want them to know or do? What's that action that I want them to come away with? The third is, what is their mindset today and what might be an obstacle? And this is the heart of any communication, not just storytelling, because what you're trying to do is get really clear on, why am I sharing this? And what is it that I want that audience to do? And how can I think about where they are today to make it be meaningful? That's going to, in less than 5 minutes, help you tell and put together a story that's going to be more meaningful for them.
Fantastic. So, as we come to the latter part of this whole piece, I'm just curious, to just for benefit our listeners and the audience, the viewers who are going to watch this podcast, what are some of pitfalls we should avoid when using storytelling to craft, especially the organizational culture? I know you touched a little bit of a manipulation part of it, but is there any broader context we can explore?
We all have stories that are our personal favorites, the ones that we love to share because we have a connection to it. But sometimes the biggest mistake we make is that we're telling that story that we love, but not the one that the audience needs to hear. So it's almost like we are just leading with the story and looking for every occasion to telling it and every occasion to tell it and force fitting it. And this is why stories start with audiences. You really want to make sure whatever you're sharing is meaningful for that audience. If you are talking to a group across multiple generations and geographies, you want to make sure that you're not telling a story that is very exclusive to any one of those. So when I was at General Electric, I was a head of culture in a business that had 90,000 employees in 150 countries. And what I found is that it did not matter where people were in the world. It didn't matter their gender or their generation. The stories were resonating, but it's because I was very intentional to make sure that what I was telling worked globally. What I was telling worked to different types of roles in the company, that it worked in the different types of things there. And so this is why we start with audiences, because we will often tell that story we love and it just doesn't work for the audience. The second one is that people will often neglect a structure. So they get so excited to tell their story, they start telling it, and it can sound something like this. So we don't always notice when a story has a structure, but we notice when it doesn't. It sounds like, I went to go meet my friend on Tuesday, and maybe it was Monday. It was Monday because I was running late, and it was Monday. It was raining. I went to get my umbrella, and I was halfway out the door when it was Tuesday. We've all sat through stories like this where you just want to get the person to move past this because they actually haven't started the story. Nothing they're sharing is meaningful. And this is what happens when we don't have a basic structure for the story. So putting a structure on the story not only helps you organize the different pieces, it's going to make it easier for the audience to listen. And the third biggest mistake I would say is that we don't leave ourselves enough time to work on a story. So in a coaching conversation, you can tell one in the moment, and that works really well. But if you're getting ready for a big presentation, you are not going to tell a great story if you are putting all of your time into preparing the PowerPoint and not thinking about what you want to say. it's important to flip that and spend 2 hours on what you want to say, and then come up with the visuals to support that, because that's going to make a more meaningful experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think my last question, and just trigger it, like what I hear is there should be a lot of preparation happening. Yeah. At the same time, I heard you saying a couple of minutes ago about, you spend a lot of time on building the PowerPoint presentation, fancying it, a lot of element to it, but you don't know the context to really share. Like when it comes to storytelling, I'm just curious. I'm just asking you, do you build the story and build the content, or what do you do? We build the content on the PowerPoint and start building a story. Which way do you think it works perfect?
No, start with your story. So first we start with our audience, right? And we get clear on what we want them to experience in their mindset and an obstacle. And then when we come up with an idea, we want to outline that story and put a basic structure in place. We want to describe the context of this story, of this setting, and who's involved. We want to talk about the conflict, the tension that's going to be explored in the story. We want to describe what happens as a result of the conflict, as the outcome. And we want to have that overall takeaway. And so you want to get that clarity before you come up with what visuals, if any, are needed to support it, because the story should drive the message, not a PowerPoint deck driving a story. And, you want to make sure that it is achieving what you want for your audience.
And one more thing, I'm sure it's done, right? When I was just watching you on coaching.com, I saw everything is visual, just an image. Very rarely I saw words, letters typed in. What's the secret behind that? What I trying to say with the story?
Yeah, there's a couple of pieces of logic behind why, if I use slides, I use almost always images. The first is anytime we are sharing a slide, a chart, a graph, the moment you display an image, your audience stops listening to you and they start looking at the image and trying to make sense of it. So if you have a really detailed image, you've lost people for multiple minutes. They are no longer listening to you. You are just in the background, and that's not helpful. I want to make sure that I am guiding people to what they are supposed to take away, because the challenge when each person is focused on the image is they're all going to make different assumptions and different interpretations of it. So I prefer to be able to control the narrative in what I say. And part of that is using images that are simple so that someone can see it, process it, and come back to what I'm saying. It allows for me to make sure we're getting the outcomes that we want. Also, it's just more brain friendly. Our brains are more relaxed looking at images than the moment someone puts up a chart or a page that has so much font on it. Your brain says, no, thanks. I'm going to go take a break right now. And you lose your audience. And so images just keep people hooked into it, and it reinforces what you're saying.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing that. So unfortunately, that's the time what we have, ladies and gentlemen. It was quite like, it was like almost a storytelling, Karen. I just felt it. I just resonated. I connected. That's the whole question comes to me in a very curious mind. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the time what we have for today. And I'd like to thank our guests who have joined today is Karen Eber, CEO and Chief Storyteller of Eber Leadership Group. And I think what I've get today, the context here is, crafting culture involves a lot of intentionally developing shared values, beliefs, and practices within the organization, and which is crucial for driving employee engagement, satisfaction, etc., and aligning employees with the organization mission, enhance performance, and of course attract top talents because people talk about it, right? So a strong culture also facilitates change management, build robust brand and reputation to contribute to overall success. Now, these, how leaders can really bring as a story, is something what we learned today. So, of course, you can get connected to Karen through her LinkedIn, and she shares amazing content. What she gave here is very, very short, and of course, please, the perfect story The perfect story, the book. Yeah, you can see behind it. And I love that. I still remember the green crayon, what is the whole experience you shared on that coaching.com. So you can get connected to her, and I'll put all the LinkedIn network and her website. You can log on to www.kareneber.com. And of course, there are other social media handles. Everything will be available in the podcast notes. On that note, Karen, it has been a great pleasure having this conversation. I love the story. I love the technique. And I learned a lot through this. I hope our listeners and our viewers will also get some great takeaway. Before you wind up, any key messages you want to give to our audience and viewers?
Look for opportunities to tell stories and recognize that no one is going to come knock on your door and ask you to tell a story. It's up to you to take each coaching session or presentation or different meetings to find an opportunity to tell a story. The more you do that, the better you get, the easier stories become to tell, and the more people will come and seek you out for them.
Wow, that's a big nugget. Thank you very much, Karen, for being in the Ei Café and sharing your valuable insights and experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Ei Café with Azeem. You can check out similar topics in episode 95, Leadership's Role in Shaping Workplace Culture from Vision to Execution with Kathy Shepard. Episode number 86, Power of Stories and How to Make an Impact with David Dwyer. Episode number 84, How to Get Your People to See What You're Saying, an approach to visual thinking with Todd Churches. Episode number 70, Visual Thinking, Can It Make a Difference in Strategy Development with Tim Hermans. I hope this conversation helps you in your professional as well as personal life. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Until next time, stay inspired and keep striving for excellence. This is Ei Café with Azeem, checking out from the cafe. My name is Azeem Saheer.
Thank you for joining yet another successful episode of Ei Café with Azeem. We appreciate your time and invite you to subscribe to the show so that you don't miss out on the next episode. Write a review and even rate it if you please. You can also follow Azeem Saheer on social media. We would also love to hear from you on what topics you'd like us to cover and even who you'd like us to invite to the show. We wish you well until we meet again on another episode of Ei Café with Azeem.